All right, so ethics in nursing. Understanding one's ethics and values is important for understanding those of others and therefore the delivery of appropriate nursing care, right? So first of all, there's different ethics. We have our ethics within the nursing code. We have healthcare ethics. There's biological ethics, ethics within certain religions, ethics within certain cultures. And everybody has different ethical beliefs and systems that they go by. And then also there are sets of values, which obviously we know are different, depending on what you've been exposed to, what you've been raised with, what you've been educated on. And we need to understand all those things so that we can give appropriate care. So, distinction between ethics and the law. Ethical values are subject to philosophical and moral interpretation, right? So, we can debate ethical values with philosophical background. Think Socrates, Plato, utilitarianism, moral interpretation. Whereas the law is a foundation that guides health providers, and it's also open to interpretation and implementation by actual governing bodies. Now, there are ethical boards that have an amount of authority in certain decision-making, but there is a huge difference between ethics and laws. Patients have certain rights regardless to provider's personal value system, right? So people have the right to an abortion right now in the United States because it's legal, and regardless of what you personally believe. That doesn't mean you have to give one, but you do have to counsel people on places to get them. Patients' wishes may be legally overridden by state interests, so like a wish for somebody to withhold care from a child, even though legally, like a parent, it has say over what they give their kid. But if the state believes that it's a negligent or an illegal act, they can override that decision. So distinction between law and ethics. So the law, external to oneself, rules and regulations of society. Ethics are internal to oneself. It's affected by values, beliefs, and individual interpretations. So a law is a law, right? Now, there's ethics, the idea like first, or justice, the ethics of justice, doing things that are fair. That's an ethical interpretation, but there's also a law of justice, right? So we don't segregate anymore. There's no such thing as separate but equal. Concerns, so conduct and actions, what a person did or failed to do. Whereas ethics, we talk about someone's motives, their attitudes and culture, why one acted as one did. Interest, society as a whole as opposed to the individual within society, whereas ethics is good of the individual within society as opposed to all society. And then enforcement, we have courts, statutes, and boards. Ethics, we have ethics committee, professional organizations. So is it legal or is it ethical? They're not the same thing. So outer Mongolia, middle of nowhere, 100 miles from man-made object, no other human than 100, gets struck by lightning. Perception of attitudes. United States, middle of nowhere, 100 miles from any man-made object, no other human within 100 miles, struck by lightning. It's somebody's fault. And I'm going to sue. What is ethics? So it's a branch of philosophy dealing with values relating to human conduct with respect to the rightness or wrongness of certain actions and to the goodness and badness of the motives and ends of such actions.
and ethics. And so just because something is a law doesn't mean that it's going to be ethical to comply with that law. So even if a group of people get together and decide, hey, this is how we're going to act, and we're going to make a law to say that we need to act this way, it doesn't necessarily mean that the actions of that group are ethical or moral. And so there is this thing called groupthink. And groupthink is basically where a bunch of people get together and make really bad decisions, right? And this is also kind of like related to sheeple, right? People who are like sheep. And sheeple are really susceptible to groupthink. They're really susceptible to getting into groups and having the entire group make really stupid, bad decisions. And there's all kinds of examples of this throughout history. And it's also something to be aware of individually, that whenever you see a group of people just being like, oh, okay, Humpty Dumpty, we'll just go along because everybody's doing it. Don't feel like, you'll feel that pressure within yourself, like, wait a minute, and should I be doing this? And you'll be like, well, everybody else is doing it, Humpty Dump. Listen to that little voice that says, wait a minute, should I be doing this? And groupthink shows up all over the place. And so, for instance, there was one day when I was swimming and they worked on the pool and my nose was burning and my eyes were burning and everybody's swimming, and I asked the coach, I'm like, hey, what's up, man? My nose is burning, my eyes burning, what'd they do to the pool? Coach is like, don't worry about it. Everybody's like, don't worry about it. Mine are burning. And I was like, no, I'm not going to swim in a pool where my nose and my eyes are burning. It's not normal. There's some kind of chemical in this water, right? So I'm the kind of person who'll be like, not going along with all the group. And, you know, there's a price to be paid for that. So laws versus ethics. What you should know is that just because a group of people decide that something should be a certain way, like, and we're going to make a law that it is going to be that way, it doesn't necessarily mean that is ethical or moral behavior. So one example of that, a classic example of that, is during the late 30s and early 40s in Germany, laws were instituted to round up all the Jewish people, put them on cattle cars, send them to concentration camps, shoot them, burn them, gas them, throw them into ovens, get rid of them. And those laws are extremely unethical, right? And so it would have been ethical behavior to, like, go against that law. And it would have been unethical behavior to comply with that law, because you're not really thinking of others when you put them on cattle cars and send them to concentration camps. So, you know, at what point do you feel a moral, ethical responsibility to stand up to the forces that are in power and say, this isn't right? And so Martin Luther King was one individual who stood up to the forces that were in power and said, this isn't right, along with a lot of other people. To have segregation in America, which was supposed to be the land of the free. Hello. And you know, Gandhi is somebody else who stood up against the power establishment and said, look, these laws aren't right. And then, you know, who else? And so, you know, we put Japanese people in concentration camps in America and took away their property in World War II. And we had the entire McCarthyism thing, right, where we were doing, like, inquisitions on people. And so just because a group of people are doing something a certain way and there are laws, complying with those laws doesn't necessarily mean you're acting in an ethical and moral behavior. So when you actually get beyond just doing what you're told by others and you're reasoning through, like, why are you doing something? You're not just complying with rules of other people who are doing the thinking for you, but when you start thinking for yourself and making your own decisions, you're actually moving into a more ethical, moral area. And that doesn't mean you're going to make better decisions, because there might be people who are thinking for themselves and making poor decisions. But if you're doing that and you're making decisions that are more pro-social, other-oriented, then you are in a more ethical, moral behavior area. All right, the next